only thing that gon' be normal is distribution. Normal folks gon' infuse some. Optimize your lineups and you feed the rest, you mute them. Turning it up, these numbers are loud. Peeping this game from a nimbus is wild. Making it rain. While I embrace all this risk, I'm insane. Talking about that best bell, I'm the best rest till into the next well. Guess I got next still. Best bell, I'm the best rest till into the next well. Guess I got next still.
We're back. It's Bradley Stalder here with BestBell Fantasy Football. We're here. I'm going to give you some must-draft fantasy football quarterbacks for 2025, right? It's February 17th. We're going to bring you the good. I'm going to bring you the goodness. Look, we're here for it. We want to know. I'm going to have a series of must-draft quarterbacks, must-draft running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Some of us are already drafting. Some of us want to know about the rookies. And of course, I'm going to talk about which rookies we definitely should have on our radar, give you some stats from PFF Player Profiler and others to discuss some of these plays. So that way, you know which players you got to be targeting, especially in these early drafts. And, as the news desk director for Player Profiler, I've got the inside scoops on lots of these things. I've got the pulse on these situations. If there's anyone in the know, it's me. I know these things. I have the inside scoops. I read the beat writers. Nevertheless, let's get into it because sometimes we need to look at where the players were from last year and whether they will repeat what they've done. Because the greatest indication of how well a player will do in the next year is what did they do last year, right? So I think it's important for us to look at some of the veterans and also look at what are the scouts saying, what are the big boards saying about players, maybe some surprises in terms of where you would expect these rookies to be landing, right? We'll look at mock draft database. If you're not looking at mock draft database, that's really a helpful tool to at least understand where are these players going to be landing approximately. And look, all of these places can be wrong. That's part of the mock drafts, right? But what these do is give you a sense of where are these players going to land. So for instance, I know this is not a quarterback but Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon's been getting a lot of buzz, right? Coming out of the Senior Bowl. And why did he get a lot of buzz? Well, he made some plays at the Senior Bowl, but he's also playing against not top competition. And so really it didn't move the needle too much for him. Ollie Gordon's still a projected day 3 running back, 4th round running back. He's following the Chuba Hubbard trajectory, which is what I said for some time, right? 2 years ago, Ollie Gordon had a phenomenal season, and then in 2024, took a major step back for a variety of reasons. Same thing with Chuba Hubbard. 2 years before he was drafted, massive output. And then pooped right before he got drafted, right? It was a major setback at Oklahoma State, nonetheless, both players. So to give you context, like this gives a reality check for a lot of players. And so we're going to start with the quarterback position. It's really clear that we need to start with quarterback and then we can move on because the quarterback position is the highest scoring. It is one of the most important positions. And so the highest scoring quarterback this year in 2024 for fantasy in terms of best ball value rating, Lamar Jackson, 12.3. 12.3. That was ahead of Josh Allen, 11.07. So it was a significant tier above where, it was a full point and a quarter ahead of Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson giving you massive spike weeks, but not just the massive spike weeks. It was that he was consistently performing that high. Yeah, I see the video is frozen. That's not great. That's not great at all. No, I don't know what the issue is. Oh, great. I'm gonna have to edit this out. This is the beauty of going live for the first time on this channel in some time. But here we are. Let's see if we can get this. Remove. No, still not doing it. Still frozen. My beautiful mug is just frozen right here. Lamar Jackson, though, a 1.25 ahead of Josh Allen. Now, what's interesting about Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen is that the standard deviations for these players are significantly different. Lamar Jackson, a 6.07 standard deviation. That means that his scores did not deviate very much. It was very clustered together. So not only was his average very, very high, but he also had tight clusters of scoring, which is what you want. It's an indication of consistency. And an indication of consistency is, when you're playing best ball, of course, you want the highest of high spike weeks. And that's what, Lamar Jackson brought. He had the highest fantasy points per game among all quarterbacks in 2024. But also, you have to scroll all the way down to Patrick Mahomes at quarterback 14 among qualified quarterbacks who played at least 3 games. Patrick Mahomes, who had a standard deviation of 5.79. Everyone else's standard deviation, every quarterback between Jackson and Mahomes, were much higher than Jackson. All right, we're going to pause here for just a moment. I'm going to try to reconnect and get my video feedback. It is working on my end, my camera, but I don't know why it's not transferring here. All right, we're back. It looks like we're back. Back in the New York groove. I'm seeing me. You're seeing me. Hopefully here on BestBell Fantasy. Okay, so the big draw for Lamar Jackson is that he was doing this with a maimed Mark Andrews. If you remember at the beginning of the season, Mark Andrews was dealing with repercussions of the car accident, and he didn't practice much in the offseason. He was very slow about getting back into the swing of things. But then Mark Andrews, double-digit touchdowns at the end of the season, and still didn't feel like he gave us a massive performance. Great. Zay Flowers. Now, here's the interesting thing about Zay Flowers. Everyone, the narrative around Zay Flowers is that, Zay Flowers exploded in year 2. But I don't think that's true. I want to distill that narrative. I want to nip that narrative in the bud, because in 2023, Zay Flowers' best ball value rating was 5.75. That means he contributed just about 6 points per game to your attempted total of 150, which is not great. It's not great. But it's fine. That's like a top 70 play. So Zay Flowers ADP should have been somewhere at the end of round 6, which was not the case. Zay Flowers was more of a round 4 type of player. And I was fading Zay Flowers last year. I did not have a lot of exposure to Zay Flowers. And what did he do in 2024? He gave us almost the exact same best ball value rating, 5.75 in 2023, 5.73 in 2024. It was just about the same. So you've got Zay Flowers, who gave you just about the same. Mark Andrews, who took a step back, but who took a step forward? It was Bateman. It was actually Rashad Bateman, who was a bona fide 0 in 2023. But Bateman was in 2022 a best ball value rated 4.63. So he went 4.63 in 2022. He went 0 in 2023 and 4.51 in 2024. So we know what Rashad Bateman is, which for those at home, like, where is a 4.5 best ball value rating? That's approximately like 90 to 95 overall. So top 100 player, respectable, right? A 8th round type of play, end of round 8 type of player in your underdog streets, fine. And you're getting Rashad Bateman in the 100s, 110s right now on underdog. I think he's a good value. But that's not like there weren't needle moving players that Lamar Jackson was throwing the ball to. It's because Derrick Henry was also opening up the field for Lamar Jackson. Teams weren't sure. Is it going to be the big dog who's going to run the ball? Or is it going to be Lamar Jackson? Because Derrick Henry was the number 3 overall player in terms of best ball value rating in 2024. 14.94, only behind Saquon Barkley and Jahmyr Gibbs. So we want to be taking Lamar Jackson yet again. There were no signs of slowing down for Derrick Henry. Yeah, he would have a couple slow starts, whatever. He's going to be crushing yet again. The offensive line is designed to give Henry space because it's designed to give Lamar Jackson space. And when there's 2 rushing options, that's dangerous. And so it's very clear that Lamar Jackson has a pathway to do this yet again in 2025. So right now on Underdog Fantasy, you're going to be able to draft Lamar Jackson. I mean, anywhere is too low because Lamar, his best ball value rating is 12.32. That is good for number 6. Lamar Jackson was the 6th most valuable player in 2024. And right now, Jackson isn't even being drafted in the first 2 rounds. He has a 31 ADP, mid-3rd round, extremely undervalued. The type of player that you want to be drafting over and over and over again. Like Lamar Jackson, 12.3, that's the same as Jonathan Taylor was this year. And Jonathan Taylor put up 24 points, 26 points, 39 points, 26 points, 16.8 fantasy points, and half-point scoring. So Lamar Jackson is the type of player that we want to be targeting, especially at the quarterback position. For those who don't know or haven't heard of best ball value rating before, best ball value rating takes into account positional value for the game, such as Underdog Fantasy's Best Ball Mania, like half-point scoring, takes only 1 quarterback, values it that way. And so this is trying to align for the positional value that each player can contribute to the 150. So Lamar Jackson, 12.32 means that on average, Lamar is contributing 12.32 fantasy points per game to your 150 of total scorers. So, of course, he's not going to score 12.32 almost ever. In fact, looking at Lamar's output, he never scored lower than 14.9 in any game this season, which is great. That's indicated by an extremely high average. But to get to 150, you can't just be scoring like 24 fantasy points per game and think that that's all cool and nice. Best ball value rating rewards consistently scoring above the top 5 quarterback score. Josh Allen, though, is flipped, and I wonder if it has to do with the offseason speculation that the Buffalo Bills are going to add yet another wide receiver. Now, Josh Allen won the MVP in 2024, and he did so with Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman and a regression of Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid was arguably one of the worst picks, and to take a step back, like this is what I talked about this past offseason with Theo Greminger. I think this was on the same podcast that Billy Muzio had me on. We talked about tight ends and who was the one tight end that I was avoiding, especially in the middle of the summer. It was Dalton Kincaid. And there were many arguments to be made for Dalton Kincaid, but one of them had to do with the existence of Dawson Knox. And how it was very hard to see, the Buffalo Bills moving away from a player that they've invested pretty heavily in, Dawson Knox, and then just putting chips in on Dalton Kincaid when you have a Keon Coleman and a Curtis Samuel who have been able to, make Keon Coleman, they were hoping would step into the Gabe Davis role, and Curtis Samuel, maybe a little bit of Stephon Diggs. I mean, I think Khalil Shakir took on more of that role. Shout out to Khalil Shakir because he played pretty well. But the reality is when you look at those types of players, like it's hard to find pathways for other players to give you the massive spike weeks. So a question in the chat from Jose: would you want to draft Lamar in best ball when you can get similar production in later rounds? Well, so the key here is like, what are we offsetting? Where can we get the value? And that's why I think using a best ball value rating is a helpful tool to determine like where are the value pockets here. And if Lamar is giving you the 6th best overall player, or even Josh Allen. So Josh Allen right now is being drafted at 28th overall. His best ball value rating last year, an 11.07, 11.1, was 22nd overall, which means that if you, relative to where he's being drafted right now, is a value. You're wondering, where do these players come from? Well, Lamar, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels was quarterback 4, and Jalen Hurts quarterback 5. These are quarterbacks who can score by rushing the ball. 4 of the top 5 are rushing quarterbacks who can get in the end zone or get a lot of rushing yards. The only one who didn't was, well, Joe Burrow, quarterback 3, was 9. A 9.0 best ball value rating. And Joe Burrow was a good value this past season, which is why not only, he was 34th overall in best ball value rating, and he's being drafted right now 48th overall. I would say when it comes to finding the values, you're going to either need tremendous rushing touchdown upside, rushing total, or you're going to need a significant, like a 95th percentile outcome in terms of passing touchdowns. And those can exist for players like a Patrick Mahomes, certainly. But Mahomes finished even behind Bryce Young in best ball value rating this year. Why was that? I think a few reasons. One is a regression of Kelsey. 2 is still figuring out how does use Xavier Worthy in the offense. 3 is Rashee Rice, obviously getting hurt with the LCL and being out for most of the season. But to take a step back about Patrick Mahomes and wondering, can he get back to top 5 quarterback? Because right now, Patrick Mahomes' ADP is quarterback 6. The big question, can Mahomes get there? I think the answer is no until Matt Nagy leaves. Right. I think that's a forgotten notion, is that coaches do drive a lot of these schemes and do employ a lot of the players. They tell the players where to line up. They're in the meeting rooms. They are influencing the players to play in particular ways. And if Matt Nagy is still the offensive coordinator there for the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, we see the difference between what happened with Eric Bieniemy and with Matt Nagy. And we know what the issue is with Matt Nagy. So who are some of the players that could get into this top tier of best ball value rating, right? I mean, looking at last year, Josh Allen was still an 11.07 or 11.36. So he was still a lock. He was a good value. But looking at what the other quarterbacks can bring, oh man, yeah. Baker Mayfield, even last year, in 2024, Baker Mayfield, a 7.63 best ball value rating. In 2023, 2.8. In 2022, a 0.05. So we know Baker Mayfield can bring the goodness in terms of getting the ball down the field, but it took him 2 years, and he needs to be able to throw to these elite wide receivers. And Mike Evans is still very good. And Chris Godwin is coming back from the injury. We're monitoring that. McMillan certainly took a next step. I think McMillan is overpriced right now. But look, we have to take our shots for these ascending sophomore players. And then we'll see if, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers bring in anyone from free agency or draft anyone in the rookie draft. But looking at who can bounce back, man, oh man. Anthony Richardson has that pathway. Obviously, there's the Indianapolis Colts. Their biggest concern is, can Anthony Richardson stay healthy? Richardson was one of the top 5 quarterbacks in 2023 in best ball value rating because he was rushing the ball. He was taking hits, and that's what led him to be injured. So our concern is that he's not going to be able to hold on to the starting position long term. We're worried about that. The Colts are worried about that. That's why there's talk of, is Aaron Rodgers going to sign with the Indianapolis Colts? Or is Russell Wilson on the radar? The Colts want to bring in legitimate competition because they're concerned that Anthony Richardson won't make it. But if Anthony Richardson does make it, he has top 5. He has Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen potential to get back into top 5 fantasy land. The problem is that he might get Justin Fields. And speaking of Justin Fields, he's also here. Like in 2024, Fields had 2 games where he scored over 23 fantasy points. He scored 23.7 and 32. So Justin Fields has the pathway to get into top 5 if he gets a starting role. I think when we talk about pocket passers, players who can get into the top 5 that are not rushing quarterbacks, I think you're primarily looking at Caleb Williams, improved scheme, DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, maybe Keenan Allen returns. Caleb Williams with the Ben Johnson head coach signing, I think he's a player that can ascend into the top 5 if the touchdown rate is there. You've got Justin Herbert, who you saw incrementally increase his passing attempts over the course of the season. Jim Harbaugh began to trust Herbert more and more. And Quentin Johnston showed up. Josh Palmer did not show up. But the Chargers are definitely in wide receiver need. Quentin Johnson played fine last year, and if anything, he significantly overperformed expectations. Herbert threw the ball up to him and said, "Hey, let's try it out. Let's get it." So I think Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert, and Dak Prescott. We forget Prescott was one of the top best ball value rated quarterbacks in 2023 and 2022. Let's pull up Prescott here. Yeah, Prescott in 2023 was the 37th overall player in best ball value rating. He was at a round 4 value, if you were to take him in round 4. And right now he's forgotten about. Yes, we don't have Mike McCarthy anymore. And Schottenheimer is probably going to look to run the ball even more. Not enticing. Is this within his range of outcomes? Yes. But I think Dak Prescott's ADP is indicative of our concern. Yeah. Dak Prescott right now is quarterback 16, 122nd overall. To give you an idea of where 122nd would be in best ball value rating, that would be like if we had 122nd would be what Jameis Winston did this year. Anthony Richardson did this year in terms of overall production. 122nd would be like Michael Pittman value, Austin Eckler value, Taysom Hill, Tucker Kraft, Dallas Goedert, like those types of production levels, which is not not a very high bar to leap. I think Dak Prescott is one of those players that we can look at and say, hey, like, yes, he finished terribly, not only the injury, but also performance, but that's kind of his floor, is like a 2-point-something best ball value rating. But when we look at what he can do, Dak right now, I mean, in 2023, he was 8.25. In 2022, it was 4.73. And 4.73 for quarterbacks in 2024, 4.7 would put him at like Brock Purdy, ahead of Bo Nix. Okay, just behind Jared Goff. So looking at what Dak Prescott could do, I think he's being drafted at his floor. He's a nice value at quarterback 16, 122nd overall. Jordan Love, he was injured. He was injured in 2024, and that very much showed up. I don't think the Packers are going to address the wide receiver position. They're just going to expect their wide receivers to get better. Love in 2023 was a 3.79 best ball value rating and 1.89 in 2024. 3.79 would have put him at like Kyler Murray, like quarterback 12, approximate range, instead of being at like quarterback 25. So I think that's the range that you can be looking at a Jordan Love at 12 to 25. Not a resounding. We know the Packers aren't going to address wide receiver in round one. Maybe they get another a third round wide receiver, but this wide receiver draft class isn't exciting outside of a couple top players like Burden or McMillan at the top. You know, there's a few that we could be interested in, but really when it comes to addressing the needs for the Green Bay Packers, they just need to get better all around. It was clear that their depth was exposed when Christian Watson went down, and that may be the pathway for them to address the wide receiver position if they expect that Christian Watson is going to be out for a long-term extended amount of time, because Watson does something on the Packers that no other wide receiver on their team can do, and stretch the ball in a contested catch type of way. Watson is fast and he is big and he can keep defenders honest. Yes, Jaden Reed is fast and he's dynamic with the ball in his hands. He's like, what if Kadarius Toney was good? You know, like that's the type of thing that we like about Jaden Reed. He's a human joystick. He's so fast and he can make cuts and moves and read defenses. But the problem is, it's about getting downfield and making those big catches. And, he can't do that. Romeo Doubs he's not fast, but he can make contested catches. He's a big boy. He can go up and get the ball, but he's not super fast in terms of creating separation and keeping defenses honest. And so we're concerned. Dontavion Wicks doesn't have good catching ability and separation. He can't catch very well, and that's one of the things that has held him back. So when it comes to like what can Jordan Love do, number one, Jordan Love can get healthy. I think that puts him back into the top 12 fantasy conversation. But also, can these wide receivers take the next step, or are the Packers going to address the wide receiver position in ways that fill in the need with Christian Watson expected to be out for a long time? I'm not drafting Christian Watson at this point at all. I'm letting other people take those risks and try the zeros. I'm just not. Same thing with Jonathan Brooks. I'm just not taking chances on the Tank Dell. I'm not taking chances on those players. Sure, if they're going to be the one player that burns me, so be it. But I'm not going to be the one who's taking the chances on them. So, a player who I'm interested in seeing can take the next step is Bryce Young. Because if you remember, Bryce Young was benched at the beginning of the season because he was bad at the beginning of the season. 11 fantasy points, 3 fantasy points, 3 fantasy points in his first 3 games that he played. He was benched after 2, after the second week, and oh man, the red rifle took over, and it was interesting, for a couple games, and then things started to get real interesting for Bryce Young, because Bryce Young went from virtual 0 to a top 13 quarterback in best ball value rating. Here are his stats over the course of the last few weeks of the season. Bryce Young, quarterback 14, 16.5 fantasy points. Week 13, quarterback 8, 23.6 fantasy points. Against Philly, we know, Super Bowl champions, he was quarterback 20, 13.5 fantasy points. Against Dallas, he should have done better against Dallas, but 2 interceptions, yikes. 14 fantasy points, quarterback 18. But then against Arizona, he beat up a easy Arizona defense. He was the quarterback 2, 27.1 fantasy points, 16.9 against a tough Tampa front, 371 air yards. Had the Panthers come down or with anything, that would be interesting. But quarterback 19, and then he was the quarterback 1 in week 18 against Atlanta, who just imploded. 36.4 fantasy points, quarterback 1 on the week. Bryce Young has the pathway to get into the top 8, top 10. Like that's probably his ceiling. That's a ceiling. He's not a rushing quarterback. He had 1 game with more than 30 rushing yards on the season, and that was against Arizona near the end of the year with a rushing score. But it's clear he can take a next step, and I think next step for Bryce Young looks like Jalen Coker, right? Looks like one more good season with Adam Thielen. They can probably bring in another wide receiver and not whiff on these. These wide receivers, gosh, man, oh man, like Xavier Leggett, we like X, we like XL, but not from a what can he bring perspective, right? The reality is Xavier Leggett. Let me pull up the best ball value rating, because this will do it. Select all. Xavier Leggett. 192nd in best ball value rating in 2024. He was behind the likes of Tyler Conklin, Keon Coleman, Tanner McKee at quarterback. That's right, Tanner McKee, backup quarterback for Philly, was a better best ball value rated player. Noah Gray, Devon Vele of Denver, a shout out Johnny Tuma. Yeah, Devon Vele, Devin Singletary, and Gabe Davis all had better best ball value rated seasons than Xavier Leggett, 192nd overall. Oof. But if it makes you feel any better, he was better than Drake May, Jalen Warren, Isaiah Pacheco, Evan Ingram, Tyler Algier. I don't know if that makes anybody feel better about any of those players, but Xavier Leggett, goodness. Oh man, it looks like my video has frozen yet again. My wife must be watching one of her shows on our Wi-Fi. That must be it. Either that or all of my, I think all of these, tabs will be doing it. Nevertheless, it's okay. I'm gonna restart. Give me a moment. There we go. We're back. We're back at it. This is working. Greinberg says yes. Oh my gosh. There we go. So Xavier Leggett. Yes, Xavier Leggett. Goodness gracious. He averaged 6.3 fantasy points per game. He had 3 games that were above 11 points in fantasy. Yuck. Xavier Leggett. And look, could Leggett turn into something? Sure. But let's look at what players who were at a 1.1 best ball value rating last year did. Okay. Here are the players who were like 1.3 to 1.0. Okay. Will Levis, dud. Matthew Stafford, didn't improve. Jaleel McLaughlin, got worse. Russell Wilson, didn't do much. Justice Hill, fine. He went from a 1.1 to a 2.04. Logan Thomas was out of the league. Desmond Ridder did nothing. Odell Beckham did nothing. Andy Dalton, 1.32 to 1.68 best ball value rate, nothing. Derek Carr, 1.33 to 0.74. Jonnu Smith, 1.33 to 1.53. 1.33 to 5.33, an increase of 4. Zay Jones went from a 1.36 to a 0. KJ Osborne went from a 1.38 to a 0.01, and Tutu Atwell went from a 1.38 to a 0.14. So you saw out of 14 players, you saw 1. So like a 7% chance, if you're lucky, that a Xavier Leggett type of player could make a jump of any meaningful amount. That's not a good hit rate. That's not what we want. We want players to be contributing pretty significantly. Okay. Because if they're not, like, what would be a good contributor for fantasy, right? You're thinking like what's a 12 fantasy points half the time would be phenomenal. That would be outstanding. So like someone at a 6 best ball value rating, sure. That would be like a round 7 type of player. If you could get round 7 value out of a player like Xavier Leggett, fine. But who was a round 7 value in 2024? Well, let's talk about it. Players who are around a 6 best ball value rating: DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson, Keenan Allen, Zach Charbonnet, Jaden Reed, Darnell Mooney. Like, you think Xavier Leggett can take that jump to that type of tier of player? And you want to take a bet with it? That's a bad bet. It's the same thing about like Rome Odunze. Like, even if Caleb Williams takes the next step, which Caleb Williams, in terms of best ball value rating, was okay last year. It wasn't great. Caleb Williams right here. He was behind Anthony Richardson. He was quarterback. So we're not counting. Let's not count Jameis. Let's not count Taysom Hill, and let's not count Josh Dobbs. He was quarterback 16 in best ball value rating, but it was a cluster, right? It was Anthony Richardson. It was, oh yeah, we can't count Taysom Hill. So it's pretty much like Caleb Williams was Anthony Richardson in terms of a per game rate of fantasy football contribution. And both of those players, I think, can take the next step if they buy into the system, if they've got the right pieces around them. Anthony Richardson had a lot of things go wrong for him. There was the internal narratives of he's not getting along with the coaches. There's the external narratives of, well, there's the external reality that Michael Pittman had a fracture back. That's a problem. So you have like your top players and, Alec Pierce, he's able to catch a couple big plays. That's helpful. The Colts are also a little more cautious about rushing the ball with Anthony Richardson because he's proven that he can't stay healthy for 17 games, which is why they want to bring in the competition for Richardson. That's the concern. Caleb Williams, I think, has a cleaner pathway to ascend into year 2. So what would be, getting the jump from a 2.5 best ball value rating, which is where Caleb Williams is, to like a 4.5, like 4.6, like Bo Nix, is not that much. A jump of about 2 points in best ball value rating, that jumps Caleb Williams from like quarterback 16 to quarterback 8, quarterback 9. Makes him a nice little value. When we look at where Caleb Williams is being drafted right now, it's quarterback 12. So it's like partly bought in, but people aren't predicting okay. People may be predicting a Caleb Williams breakout, but the market is only going halfway on it. They're not fully bought in to a Caleb Williams breakout. But if you look at, I wonder where the Ben Johnson quarterback for 2024 ended up in terms of best ball value rating. Oh, it's Jared Goff, who was the quarterback 7. And Goff, as we know, is notoriously immobile. There is more pocket mobility with Caleb Williams. I would say Caleb Williams, a more overall talented, maybe not refined, not experienced enough, maybe can't make the reads that Jared Goff can, but athletically, Caleb Williams over Jared Goff, and that probably gets Caleb Williams into the top 6, top 7 pathway. So if we're talking about players to be targeting, must draft quarterbacks, it's Caleb Williams for 2025, right? It's Bryce Young for 2025, Justin Herbert, 2025. Herbert right now is quarterback 14. The pathway for Herbert is very, very clear. He just stays healthy and they get one more piece. The offense is very efficient with Jim Harbaugh. J.K. Dobbins may be moving along. There's not much of a backup plan for running back. The team moved toward more passing in the second half of the season. So we like Justin Herbert, like Caleb Williams, like Bryce Young. Jared Goff probably takes a step back a little bit. He had a 6.33 best ball value rating, and that was a big, big jump because Goff, in the previous 2 seasons, a 4.12 and a 2.58 best ball value rating. So I think that's more so where Goff is going to end up. But Goff right now, quarterback 9, I think we need to soft fade Goff a little bit. Like take enough Goff, but he's not a like fade into oblivion type of player. Just moderately move him back. Like give me Caleb Williams over him. Give me Brock Purdy over Jared Goff. You have to think that the Lions are going to take a little bit of a step back. But a player who, we talk about Bryce Young being a nice value. Look, the reality is that the Carolina Panthers can't do this without pass catchers. And an extremely undervalued pass catcher at this point for Bryce Young is Adam Thielen, right? Thielen has a 6.45 and 7.11 best ball value rating over the last 2 seasons. To give context, right? Adam Thielen, right? A 6.5, 7.0 best ball value rating puts Thielen at like round 5 value, round 6 in terms of what he is able to like pay off. Right now, Adam Thielen is 174th overall and wide receiver 74. He's an auto click. He's an auto click because he's free. The upside is clearly there. He's been productive the last 2 seasons for the Carolina Panthers. So we need to be buying into Adam Thielen if we're buying into Bryce Young. Look, I like Jalen Coker. I think Jalen Coker is going to be a nice little ascending piece. But we look at what Adam Thielen's been able to do in his limited time. He had a game of 23 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points, 19, 15, 28 fantasy points. Yeah, and he gets touchdowns. He's trusted near the goal line. He's like Mike Evans light. Mike Evans light. You want Mike Evans light at 174th overall? He's still under contract for 2025. There's no reason for the Carolina Panthers, who want to be competitive in year 2. They saw some good things happening in year 1. They started to see a pivot, and then year 2 of this new coaching staff, they want to see Bryce Young take the next step as a full season starter, and Adam Thielen's part of it. Jalen Coker probably a part of it too. Xavier Leggett remains to be seen. And I know I've been talking a lot about Coker. Coker, a 2.57 best ball value rating. That was ahead of Amari Cooper, ahead of Kayshon Boutte, ahead of MVS, ahead of DeMarcus Robinson, ahead of Isaiah Likely in terms of best ball value rating, ahead of Rome Odunze, ahead of Brandon Ayuk. So yeah, Jalen Coker could take another step. Looking at where players who scored in the 2.5 range in 2023 did in 2024. So like Patrick Mahomes went from 2.5 to 3.17. Jared Goff went from 2.58 to 6.3. Tyler Algier went from 2.6 to 0.9. Kareem Hunt went from 2.65 to 5.33. Hunter Henry went from 2.66 to 1.61. So those are like within the range of outcomes. All right. I think we've hammered this enough. This has been a lot of fun diving into some must-draft quarterbacks, looking at the top performers. What will it take for these players to get there? Yeah, we'll keep this going here in 2025. Follow me on X Machine at FF Stalder. Until next time, good luck in the fantasy football streets, everybody.
I embrace all this risk, I'm insane. Talking about that best bell, I'm the best rest till into the next world. Guess I got next still. Best bell, I'm the best rest till into the next world. Guess I got next still.